Hello students, welcome to the lecture on employee learning, and after the lecture we will be able to learn the following objectives. Understand the concept of learning, define the principles of learning, explain the learning process, describe the reinforcement theory, explain the social learning theory, describe the adult learning theory, explain the expectancy theory, understand information processing theory, describe the learning cycles. Let's start with a brief introduction to employee learning. A learning theory is the process by which humans and animals obtain knowledge and skills. The three basic categories used to classify learning theories include behaviorism, cognitivism, and constructivism. The wide range of different learning theories is a result of the common variables present when learning is taking place, such as age, emotional state, and learning environment.
E-learnings can increase a company's productivity by giving employees the tools and skills they need to enhance performance. Training in classrooms can be very time-consuming, boring, and costly. They may also take away from profits. E-learning gives the opportunity to learn during a person's downtime and not taken at a single location. Mobile e-learnings are starting to pop up in addition to computers. These include podcasts as well as interactive learning on smartphones. Individuals who consistently are on the go benefit from these the most. It is much easier to take trainings on one's own time than when the company sets aside classroom time. The employee will then be motivated to take these trainings instead of forced to take them. The employees will be happier and more confident in their job. No one likes to fail in front of a classroom full of other peers. E-learning helps employees test new ideas without the failing part. During an e-learning, an individual can fail. The worst case scenario is that you can always just start over. This encourages creativity and new ideas. Individuals who will be able to think outside the box without the fear of failing in front of others. New interactive e-learnings are very open and show a scenario in the workplace with different answers that do different things. On new e-learnings, there is no one correct answer. This type of e-learning will help companies succeed when implementing a differentiating business strategy. People learn from mistakes, but it's a lot easier to fail while learning during e-learning than practicing in front of other people. Just starting over is something that cannot be done in a classroom setting. An individual cannot rewind a session if they miss a key point in a classroom setting. With e-learnings, this is totally possible and encouraged. Effective e-learning help the learners retain the course content. This is done by creating an easy to understand and easy user interface. Adding multimedia and interactive scenarios are the key to holding people's attention and being able to retain the material. The e-learning should not just be black and white text. It needs to be visually appealing. The most important part is the content. This needs to be active and very thought-provoking. If all these factors are combined, then it creates a very rich learning experience that is repeatable. Creating a learning environment like this is going to help employees retain course knowledge, which produces great results. Working for a company like Best Buy has really showed me how e-learnings are beneficial. Their motto is knowledge is power. They really have pushed the training and believes that these will help. According to their study, 1 out of 3 associates in 2010 were stumped by questions every day. They implemented a huge trend toward e-learnings. The different departments in Best Buy all have required e-learnings. Technology is one of the fastest growing industries, which means that e-learnings are updated frequently. E-learnings have made companies like Best Buy and Apple successful. The employees are more productive, have the freedom to learn from their mistakes, and are able to retain knowledge. The combination of these outcomes creates a successful company.
Let's discuss the concept of learning. Conceptual learning or concept learning is a learning method as well as a form of critical thinking in which individuals master the ability to categorize and organize data by creating mental logic-based structures. This learning method is often compared to procedural learning, considered the most conventional and widely used method of teaching. Learning is acquiring new or modifying existing knowledge, behaviors, skills, values, or preferences, and may involve synthesizing different types of information. The ability to learn is possessed by humans, animals, and some machines. The laws, as initially formulated, are 3 in number: readiness, exercise, effect. Law of readiness. The law of readiness is explained by the statement: when an individual is ready to act or to learn, he acts or learns more effectively and with greater satisfaction than when not ready. Thus, readiness is mental set, which means that an employee can learn his lessons when he is inclined to work at them. Law to exercise. This law has 2 aspects and as such has 2 related or allied doctrines: law of use, law of disuse. The law of use states, when a modifiable connection is made between a situation and a response, that connection's strength is, other things being equal, increased. Similarly, the law of disuse states, when a modifiable connection is not made between a situation and response over a length of time, which connection's strength is decreased. Law of effect. The principle of effect is the fundamental law of teaching and learning. The law states that when pleasant or satisfying consequences follow or attend a response, the latter tends to be repeated. When painful or annoying consequences attend a response, it tends to be eliminated. Additional laws, principles. Law of primacy. Things learned first create a strong impression. What is taught must be right the first time. What the employee learns must be procedurally correct and applied the very first time. Law of recency. Things most recently learned are best remembered. Frequent review and summarization help fix in the mind the material covered. This principle often determines the sequence of lectures within a course of instruction. Law of intensity. The more intense the material taught, the more likely it will be retained. An employee will learn more from the real thing than from a substitute. In the classroom, demonstrations, skits, and role-playing increase the learning experience of employees. Law principle of freedom. Things freely learned are best learned. The greater the freedom enjoyed by the employees in the class, the greater the intellectual and moral advancement enjoyed by them. Let's move on to talk about the learning process. Employee development is designed to enable employees to learn and be challenged in new and different ways. The learning philosophy is based on the idea that personal and professional learning is most effective when it involves hands-on experience. Mental and physical processes. When it comes to learning, everyone learns every day in their life. They learn in many ways. One way is through word association. Not many people really know what word association means. Rather, they do not take the time to examine its purpose. Reinforcement theory is the process of shaping behavior by controlling the consequences of the behavior. In reinforcement theory, a combination of rewards and/or punishments is used to reinforce desired behavior or extinguish unwanted behavior. Reinforcement, punishment, and extinction. The most important principle of reinforcement theory is, of course, reinforcement. Generally speaking, there are two types of reinforcement: positive, negative. Positive reinforcement results when the occurrence of a valued behavioral consequence has the effect of strengthening the probability of the behavior being repeated. Negative reinforcement results when an undesirable behavioral consequence is withheld, with the effect of strengthening the probability of the behavior being repeated. Schedules of reinforcement. The timing of the behavioral consequences that follow a given behavior is called the reinforcement schedule. There are two broad types of reinforcement schedules: continuous, intermittent. There are at least 4 types of intermittent reinforcement schedules: fixed interval, fixed ratio, variable interval, variable ratio. Reinforcement theory applied to organizational settings. Probably the best known application of the principles of reinforcement theory to organizational settings is called behavioral modification, or behavioral contingency management. Let's now talk about the social learning theory. In social learning theory, behavior is learned from the environment through the process of observational learning. People learn through observing others' behavior, attitudes, and outcomes of those behaviors. Modeling process. The modeling process helps to understand that not all observed behaviors could be learned effectively, nor learning can necessarily result to behavioral changes. The modeling process includes the following steps in order to determine whether social learning is successful or not. Step 1. Attention. Social cognitive theory implies that one must pay attention to learn. If one demonstrates to learn from the behavior of the model, the person that demonstrates the behavior, then one should eliminate anything that catches the attention other than him. Step 2. Retention. Retention of the newly learned behavior is necessary. Without it, learning of the behavior would not be established, and one might need to get back to observing the model again, since one was not able to store information about the behavior. Step 3. Reproduction. When one is successful in paying attention and retaining relevant information, this step requires one to demonstrate the behavior. In this phase, practice of the behavior by repeatedly doing it is important for improvement. Step 4. Motivation. Feeling motivated to repeat the behavior is what one needs in order to keep on performing it. This is where reinforcement and punishment come in. One can be rewarded by demonstrating the behavior properly and punished by displaying it inappropriately.
How do you become really good at something? Well, I can't give a specific step-by-step guide for every single person on a YouTube video because it's impossible. There's a basic learning approach that applies to anything. I'll provide the model, you fill in the blanks. It works for learning guitar, tai chi, business, chess, training your cat, anything. We'll go through the 5-step process. So learning any skill happens in a pyramid. Not the normal pyramid and not a food pyramid, but a pyramid broken into chunks, each chunk representing a smaller skill that is critical for becoming proficient in the overall task. Why the gap between chunks? Learning anything new generally doesn't happen linearly. The learning process isn't like standing on an infinite escalator, though that sounds really fun. When learning anything new, there are plateaus and places where you need to extend yourself and allow room for failure. You also can't learn everything at once, so you need to start with the core concepts and skills and work your way up from there. Let's take a look at an example of the learning process with playing guitar. When you first pick up a guitar, it's fun for about 2 minutes before you realize you don't know how to play any songs or chords. You then worry about annoying everyone around you. Playing the guitar doesn't become fun until you master the first chunk, which is generally learning basic chords, finger positions, or strumming. Here's the 5-step process to learning the guitar. Define a chunk of information to learn that is just outside your current capability. Since we're starting at the very bottom, it could be anything, but you want to start with the core foundation, so either notes or chords or strumming. 2, focus on mastering that one chunk, meaning you're not going to leap from learning the solo to Stairway to Heaven right away. You're sticking with that one simple chunk until you've internalized it. Number 3, practice deliberately. Notice mistakes when they happen and correct them instead of avoiding them or working around them. Focus on making things that are uncomfortable or you're not so good at a lot better instead of avoiding them. Number 4, repeat the process until you can perform the chunk with little to no conscious effort. This frees your mind to focus on more complicated skills and move up the learning pyramid. Number 5, determine the next chunk to master and start the process all over again. This might be learning scales, finger picking, advanced chords, improvising, or different techniques. You have to start the process all over again and find the next chunk that is slightly more difficult than the one you just learned. At each stage, you have to go through the feeling of being a little bit uncomfortable, going through that boring, possibly repetitive practice, and eventually internalizing the new skill. And then repeat the process all over again. You'll find this happens in no matter what the skill is. Robert Greene, in his book Mastery, which analyzed how people rise to the top of their field from Muhammad Ali to Albert Einstein, has a great quote from that book that describes this process. If we are learning a complex skill, such as flying a jet in combat, we must master a series of simple skills, one on top of the other. Each time one skill becomes automatic, the mind is freed up to focus on the higher one. At the very end of this process, when there are no more simple skills to learn, the brain has assimilated an incredible amount of information, all of which has become internalized, part of our nervous system. A whole complex skill is now inside us and at our fingertips. We are thinking, but in a different way, with the body and mind completely fused. We are transformed. So while I use guitar as the example, the process applies to learning anything. To summarize the process to learn any skill: 1, determine the first chunk to learn. 2, master that one chunk. 3, practice deliberately. Mistakes are the feeling of plateauing are normal here. 4, repeat the practice until you've internalized the skill. 5, move on to the next chunk. So this is a sweeping generalization of the learning process. It's not easy. You won't invent the next Facebook tomorrow, but you'll be.
As adults, one may not know as much as the trainer, but one has a lot of experiences and one often wants to talk about what one knows and decide what one would like to learn. The ways one teaches employees thus may not work well for adults. An adult learning theory, also known as andragogy, is a set of ideas about how adults learn new skills or information. The following 5 principles are key to effective adult learning. 1. To be respected. 2. To see the immediate usefulness of the learning. 3. A safe learning environment. 4. To be engaged in their learning. And 5. Learning to be relevant to their lives. Adults are internally motivated and self-directed. Adult learners resist learning when they feel others are imposing information, ideas, or actions on them. The role is to facilitate an employee's movement towards more self-directed and responsible learning, as well as to foster the employee's internal motivation to learn. Adults are goal-oriented. Adult employees become ready to learn when they experience a need to learn it in order to cope more satisfyingly with real-life tasks or problems. The role is to facilitate an employee's readiness for problem-based learning and increase the employee's awareness of the need for the knowledge or skill presented. Adults are relevancy-oriented. Adult learners want to know the relevance of what they are learning to what they want to achieve. Adults are practical. Through practical fieldwork experiences, interacting with real clients and their real-life situations, employees move from classroom and textbook mode to hands-on problem-solving, where they can recognize firsthand how what they are learning applies to life and the work context. Adult learners like to be respected. Respect can be demonstrated to the employees by taking interest, acknowledging the wealth of experiences that the employee brings to the placement, regarding them as a colleague who is equal in life experience, encouraging expression of ideas, reasoning, and feedback at every opportunity. Did you know? Andragogy as a study of adult learning originated in Europe in 1950s and was then pioneered as a theory and model of adult learning from the 1970s by an American practitioner. Let's explore the expectancy theory. The expectancy theory states that employees' learning is an outcome of how much an individual wants a reward, valence, the assessment that the likelihood that the effort will lead to expected performance, expectancy, and the belief that the performance will lead to reward. Theory is based on an employee's beliefs. Valence. It refers to emotional orientations which people hold with respect to outcomes, rewards, the value the person attaches to first and second order outcomes. Expectancy. It refers to employees' different expectations and levels of confidence about what they are capable of doing, the belief that effort will lead to first order outcomes. Instrumentality. It refers to the perception of employees whether they will actually receive what they desire, even if it has been promised by a manager. The perceived link between first order and second order outcomes. Advantages of the expectancy theory. It is based on self-interest, individual who want to achieve maximum satisfaction and who wants to minimize dissatisfaction. This theory stresses upon the expectations and perception what is real and actual is immaterial. It emphasizes on rewards or payoffs. It focuses on psychological extravagance, where final objective of individual is to attain maximum pleasure and least pain. Limitations of the expectancy theory. The expectancy theory seems to be idealistic because quite a few individuals perceive high degree correlation between performance and rewards. The application of this theory is limited as reward is not directly correlated with performance in many organizations. It is related to other parameters, also such as position, effort, responsibility, education, etc. Implications of the expectancy theory. The managers can correlate the performed outcomes to the aimed performance levels. The managers must ensure that the employees can achieve the aimed performance levels. The deserving employees must be rewarded for their exceptional performance. The reward system must be fair and just in an organization. Organizations must design interesting, dynamic, and challenging jobs. Information processing theory describes how information is received, processed, stored, and then retrieved in the human brain. It is interesting that this theory compares processing of information by humans to those of computers. Sensory registers. The best understood of the sensory registers, SRs, are for hearing echoic and seeing iconic. Very little is known about tactical touch, olfactory smell, and gustatory taste SRs. Short-term memory. Short-term memory, STM, is also known as working memory and is where consciousness exists. In the cup example, if one attends to the cup, it will be moved into STM. At this point, it is difficult to talk about the cup in STM memory without referring to long-term memory, LTM, long-term memory. The final stage in the IP model is long-term memory, LTM, which is typically termed call memory. LTM is everything one knows and knows how to do. For most cognitive psychologists, the world of LTM can be categorized as one of three types of memory: declarative, procedural, or episodic. Let's now discuss about the learning cycles. The learning cycle rests on constructivism as a theoretical foundation. Constructivism is a dynamic and interactive model of how humans learn. A constructivist perspective assumes employees must be actively involved in their learning and concepts are not transmitted from trainer to employee but constructed by the employee. Engagement. Engagement is a time when the trainer is on center stage. The trainer poses the problem, pre-assesses the employees, helps employees make connections, and informs employees about where they are heading. The purpose of engagement is to focus employees' attention on the topic, pre-assess what employees' prior knowledge, inform the employees about the lesson's objectives, remind the employees of what they already know that they will need to apply to learning the topic at hand. Pose a problem for the employees to explore the next phase of the learning cycle. Evaluation of engagement. Evaluation's role in engagement revolves around the pre-assessment to find out what the employees already know about the topic at hand. The trainer could ask questions and have the employees respond orally and/or in writing. Exploration. Now the employees are at the center of the action as they collect data to solve the problem. The trainer makes sure the employees collect and organize their data in order to solve the problem. The employees need to be active. The purpose of exploration is to have employees collect data that they can use to solve the problem that was posed. Evaluation of exploration. In this portion of the learning cycle, the evaluation should primarily focus on process, example, on the employee's data collection, rather than the product of the employee's data collection. Trainers ask themselves questions such as the following: how well are the employees collecting data? Are they carrying out the procedures correctly? How do they record the data? Is it in a logical form or is it haphazard? Explanation. In this phase of the process, employees use the data they have collected to solve the problem and report what they did and try to figure out the answer to the problem that was presented. The trainer also introduces new vocabulary, phrases, or sentences to label what the employees have already figured out. Elaboration. The trainer gives employees new information that extends what they have been learning in the earlier parts of the learning cycle. At this stage, the trainer also poses problems that employees solve by applying what they have learned. The problems include both examples and non-examples. Now in the end, let us summarize what we have learned in this lecture. The right employee training, development, and education provides big payoffs for the employer in increased productivity, knowledge, loyalty, and contribution to general growth of the firm. Repetitions of activities fix knowledge and skills to be learned. Practice makes perfect. Lack of practice weakens the memory and skills. Social cognitive theory implies that one must pay attention to learn. If one wants to learn from the behavior of the model, the person that demonstrates the behavior, then one should eliminate anything that catches the attention other than him. The learning cycle rests on constructivism as its theoretical foundation. Constructivism is a dynamic and interactive model of how humans learn. Engagement is a time when the trainer is on center stage. The trainer poses the problem, pre-assesses the employees, helps employees make connections, and informs employees about where they are heading.